Through the external cameras of your ships, the battle is visible only as tiny pinpoints of light, contrasted against the dark void that engulfs you. Hardly the spectacle you always imagined space combat would be. Even on your bridge, life and death are boiled down to the movement of a few blinking dots on a polar grid. Despite the simplicity of the presentation, you know that the stakes are incredibly high. For those specks of light and those blinking dots represent ships and weapons traveling near thousands of kilometers each second until they either tear through their target or are blown apart by defensive weaponry. This is the second half of your first real battle. What sound would these weapons make if they traveled through air instead of through empty space? You wonder if that would make all this any easier to stomach. But no. For you, and for your enemies, death screams silently across the void. Welcome to Celestial Horizons, Operation Bloodhound, Part 4. We're going to step away from the developing battle for just a moment. As you are the commanding officer of the ESS Phobonautis, and leading the retrieval effort of the ESS Antigone, here are a few things that you need to know. This installment takes place in the moments immediately after Operation Bloodhound Part 3 came to a close. Here's what the slim majority of the audience chose to do to get you here. First, you did not follow the Chief of Security's suggestion to stop and do a thorough search of your ship. You realized that doing so would mean that the Antigone would reach the asteroid belt before you could intercept it. And when forced to weigh the possibility of sabotage on your ship against the Antigone getting additional reinforcements, you chose to risk saboteurs. You pushed ahead, closing the gap between your small fleet and the ships you were pursuing, sent a message to Rook telling him to be ready for your attack, and prepared your crew for combat. In the first few moments of this battle, before they really had time to react, you dealt heavy damage to the enemy cruiser with your massive railgun. Though not completely subdued, your teams estimate it won't take much more to make them effectively dead in the water. That's the power of taking the initiative here. However, your Chief of Security's fears came true, and saboteurs aboard your ship have caused unknown amounts of damage to your main railgun. You still have 60 stiletto fighters ready to go, and all 40-point defense arrays are operational and actively defending your vessel from the return fire of the enemy frigate. Though the two GNA ships with you, the GNS John Paul and the GNS Imperator, have been incredibly useful in defending your ship, the situation took on a whole new level of complication when the Antigone began to push its engines as hard as it could. It's making a last-ditch break for the asteroid belt, betting a large amount of fuel on being able to get to whatever is waiting for you all in the Isarian Gap. You made the call to send your two escorts, both smaller and faster than you, after the Antigone while you stayed behind to deal with this annoying frigate and finish disabling the cruiser. In the span of about 10 minutes, you transferred 2 shuttles full of Marines to the GNS John Paul, the faster of the two, to make sure that your people would be the ones to get the Antigone, and not anybody who reported to somebody other than you. It's not that you don't trust the two captains that have been helping you. It's that you're not as certain about the organization they represent, the Gate Network Administration. With the transfer complete, the John Paul and the Imperator pushed ahead at full speed, leaving you to deal with the escorts. You almost felt bad for the escorts. The cruiser had stopped firing weapons and had stopped changing course to try to maneuver into a better position. You ordered one sensors officer to keep an eye on them and turned your attention to the frigate. It's dramatically smaller than your ship. but you know better than to not take it seriously. Even the smallest threat can cripple or disable a ship if given the chance. However, with you able to give it your full attention, its crew must know that it has no chance to win here. Which is what makes the whole situation very strange. If these were pirates or marauders, they'd have bailed out of this whole endeavor long ago, especially now that the Antigone is making a break for it. But they're still firing. You expect them to turn and give chase to the Imperator and John Paul to try to protect the Antigone, but they don't. Instead, they begin trying to close the gap between you and them. You're not sure what they could possibly hope to achieve with that, unless they were desperate. Perhaps they don't know your railgun is offline. They may think running is a good way to get blown into a million pieces, so getting closer to you makes it much more difficult for you to line up a shot. But they aren't likely to win the fight, especially if you commit your fighters to it. Are they just trying to do some damage before a later retreat? Or are they expecting reinforcements and just want to hold out until they arrive? Your teams haven't seen anybody else approaching your position yet, but you tell them to keep an eye out. You have a choice to make. Scramble your fighters and try to disable the frigate. Based on the weaponry you've observed on it, you could safely get away with only deploying 12 of your 60 fighters, but doing so puts them at risk and consumes some of your vital fuel reserves. Alternatively, you could burn less fuel and try to nudge your ship closer to them as well, hopefully bringing them within effective range of your point defense arrays. They'll get the chance to shoot at you some more, but if you can find the right opening, maybe bait them in closer, then they won't be able to adjust their trajectory in time to avoid getting a lot of new holes. To use your fighters, choose Path A. To use your point defense turrets, choose Path B. You've chosen Path A to use your fighters. The signal is given, and 12 of your stern-faring L-37 Stiletto strike craft streak off into the darkness, moving towards the frigate. It takes a few minutes for them to get there, and when they reach weapons ranges, their neat formation turns into an unintelligible mess of disparate movement. You listen to your squadron commanders give orders remotely, calling out incoming targets and directing targeted strikes on various areas of the frigate. You've watched them during training sessions where they've always performed to a satisfactory degree. But real combat seems to have revealed the true capabilities of your pilots. As the frigate's various batteries respond to their attack, 2 of them are destroyed, 4 of them are damaged by dispersed effect weaponry, and 1 actually receives over-the-comms praise from their squadron leader.
Brilliant, Jaguar 7. That's your 3rd turret.
Some shots from the frigate's railguns get close to causing you trouble, but your teams are able to eliminate every single inbound weapon. In the end, the frigate stops firing and grows still in the dark sky. Your already thin fuel resources have been further depleted by using the fighters, and you're now down to having only 54 functional ones. But you've avoided additional damage to the Phobonautis, and you've discovered a talented pilot in your ranks, one to keep your eyes on going forward. Continue to the conclusion section below to carry on with the story. You've chosen Path B, to draw it in close and use your point defense arrays. Watching its course and waiting for an opening makes you feel like a cat waiting for a mouse to stick its head out of a hole. Move too soon and you'll never get it like this. Wait too long and it'll get right past you. And in this case, that'll mean taking additional damage. You count on your teams to keep you safe. The frigate is able to shoot 19 times in 9 minutes, firing from 2 small railguns mounted topside of the vessel. That's a lot to keep track of, but your teams behave admirably. Only once does one get through and slams into your portside hull about halfway down. But there's no immediate indications of damage. No systems lost connection. Maybe your hull took the brunt of it, or maybe you'll just have to wait for the full damage report to find out what they got. During that 9 minutes, you purposefully underutilized your point defense systems, making it seem like their effective range was much smaller than it actually is. When the frigate was foolish enough to get closer to try to score more hits, you revealed the real capabilities of your weapons and began to riddle it with holes. Though not as individually impactful as a shot from a railgun, these point defense arrays make the frigate look like Swiss cheese in under 2 minutes. At the least, you have depressurized most of the right-hand side of their ship. At most, you've permanently crippled it. The impacts send it drifting steadily away from your position. Then, the preliminary damage report for their hit comes in. In addition to a hull breach and a few casualties, one of your bays has completely lost most of its launching mechanisms. They don't know the full scope of it, but expect it to take at least 3 times as long to deploy fighters or shuttles. Continue to the conclusion section below to carry on with the story. With the frigate disabled, and with no further signs of resistance from the cruiser, you begin a flurry of communications with your damage teams, with security, with the 2 ships ordering their complete surrender, with marine teams, with John Paul and the Imperator, and with the Council of Eberus, your bosses. Damage teams. In addition to the costs of taking the frigate on your own, they've finished assessing the railgun explosion. It looks like the explosives were planted on the side of the railgun itself. In addition to a hole large enough for a car to drive into the barrel of your railgun from the maintenance hallway, the explosion cut power to several sections of the rails and severely damaged a 50-meter rail itself. Complete repairs would take a lot of specialized parts and access to a dry dock over the period of 6 to 8 weeks. Your chief of engineering tells you that if her teams work 2 shifts or 16 hours a day, they may be able to get you a short-term solution. They can use some low-quality replacement rail sections you have, and reroute the power to other nodes, giving you full access to the railgun in less than 6 days. However, doing so would put extra strain on other power links that they weren't designed to handle. She estimates that will give you at least 7, but no more than 13 more shots before 1 or more of the other nodes failed. And at that point, it'd be totally inoperable, no matter what they tried. Their second option involves moving the loading and firing section of the railgun to a point beyond the damage. This effectively cuts your railgun down to 2/3 its original length, drops its effective range and power down by 45%, and increases the firing time by 2.5 minutes while the engineering teams resecure everything. It'll be a makeshift duct tape and chewing gum filled solution, but it may last you longer. Every shot has a 9% chance of causing the weapon to just fall apart, with an additional 2% chance for every shot after the first. Either way, both of her suggestions will make the eventual full repairs take longer and be more expensive. Security hasn't found the saboteur yet, but does have some leads. This one appears to know where the cameras are, so they used a carefully planned escape route that minimizes how long they would have been visible. The chief of security is confident they'll catch the saboteur now that they've shown their hand, but it may take some more time. The cruiser and the frigate respond to your message, identifying themselves and opening their docking ports to your shuttles. Your Marines begin the process of arresting everybody on board and taking possession of each ship, but doing so thoroughly takes 2 hours on the cruiser and an hour and a half on the frigate. The cruiser identifies itself as Royal Fortune, and the frigate as Dire Walrus. Neither are registered vessels, and neither immediately tell you about who they work for or what their goals were. You look forward to meeting their commanding officers yourself and seeing which of their crew members talk during interrogation. In total, you take 159 prisoners on Royal Fortune and 88 prisoners on Dire Walrus. It will take a few days to get them all processed and to do a full sweep of their ships for traps and contraband. You hope to find data they may not have been able to erase before you got there. Neither ship is in any position to keep fighting or even do much more than limp somewhere. Royal Fortune, the cruiser, still has functional weapons, but their central power system has been so thoroughly demolished that it's next to impossible to use any of them. Dire Walrus, the frigate, is going to need 11 days of hull patches before most of the ship is even habitable. You assign several teams of marine engineers who are specially trained to commandeer other ships in situations like these. It looks like you may be sitting here for a while. Well, you or somebody else. You may have more important places to be. An update from the GNS Imperator comes through.
To ESS Phobonautis, from ESS Imperator. We have caught up with the ESS Antigone, burning through a lot of fuel in the process. Both the John Paul and I are sitting at about 60%. It began to fire at us immediately. Following your instructions to do the least amount of damage as possible, I hit its missile launch system on the starboard side. Then the John Paul closed the gap. Your shuttle pilots insisted they could avoid the point defense systems and attempted to jump the gap from the John Paul to the Antigone. One acted as a sort of distraction, while the other successfully connected to the airlock Rook indicated would be available. Your inside agent came through. The other shuttle has remained with us, and your Marines are currently attempting to take the Antigone and open the shuttle bay door for the second team to assist. Judging by the skills of their operatives, the Marines anticipate that the process of defeating hostiles on board the Antigone and regaining control of the ship will take 8 to 12 hours. At that rate, we will not be able to stop the Antigone before it reaches the asteroid belt. Right now, we are holding course and maintaining pace with the Antigone, and will continue to do so, even as it plunges into the Isarian Gap while we support your Marines. Do you have different orders?
You also have a message from Rook to review. Check out Midnight Sentry Episode 6, Escape, here on YouTube. In sending him another message, you may be able to convince him to try and help the Marines, to speed up that process to stop the Antigone before it gets to wherever it's going. But if you don't want to do that, you'll need to either accept that the GNA ships will be going in without you, or authorize them to blow more holes in the Antigone, which is something the Council wanted you not to do. They don't exactly have the money for repairs, and the way things are going, you need as many functional ships as you can get. Because you can't wait for the Council to convene and make a decision, you need to make the call now, and then tell the Council what you'd like them to do. Your message to them, based on what some of you wrote up during Part 3, begins like this. To the Council of Eberus, from ESS Phobonautis. Salutations, Council. You have work to do. I take it that you are aware of the intensely recent developments of Operation Bloodhound. We request immediate refuel and any assistance you can offer in terms of sending other ships. Please contact the Hypatia Commission immediately to speed up the process of getting any sort of assistance from them. This is an issue that threatens not only the Antigone or the Council, but Hypatia itself. If the Commission is really bound to the duty and creed they swore to uphold, they should see that. The last thing I want to do is underestimate this force and the resources. We're counting on you, Council. Good luck, and Godspeed. What else do you add? What do you tell the GNA ships to do? There's a link in the video description below to a form where you can send in your different decisions. Be sure to check that out and submit it before Monday, December 13th if you want your decisions to shape this story. To review what you've got to decide, tell us whether you picked Path A or Path B during this part. What would you like your engineering team to do about the railgun? Leave it alone? Put in temporary replacement parts? Or make some custom modifications? What do you tell the Imperator and the John Paul to do? Stay with the Antigone? Open fire on it? Fall back and leave your Marines alone on there? And lastly, you have a few messages to send. What do you say to Rook? What do you add to your report to the Council of Eberus? You can write it all out, or you can simply indicate the kinds of things you'd like to see covered in the message. And if there's anything else you'd like to do in this moment as you sit with your 2 captured ships and hope your teams can finish tackling the Antigone, let us know on that form too. This form closes on December 13th at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Operation Bloodhound Part 5 releases on December 22nd. Be sure to check out Midnight Sentry, the podcast that reflects both your actions here and the actions of the Council of Eberus, our Patreon group. Given from the perspective of messages from Rook to the Council of Eberus, it releases weekly on Thursdays. As you consider your options, good luck and Godspeed.